go around and start with those and see what, different panelists, which each of you, if you have thoughts or reflections on that. But I'm also hoping we can build off each other's thoughts and ideas, and everybody can feel free to jump in if you've got something to build on that was just said and say, I'd love to jump in now because I have this thought that could add to that, or, this relates to something that I've been thinking about, or feel free to do that. And I just really consider my role to be here to listen to what you all have to say and to help facilitate a conversation and learn. So I know all of you have a lot, probably more experience facilitating these conversations, so don't feel shy if you want to jump in for a minute and take it in a different direction. I'm happy for that.
Do you have an order in mind for us to start to respond?
Well, I could just go, I guess I don't really have an order in mind. Kareem said he doesn't want to be first or second.
Or third.
So I guess Kareem is fourth. Does anybody want to be first?
Well, if the first question is about, you wanted to have this be talking about, well, what is sustainability, kind of a frame, I could just say a few of those, basic remarks of what are people thinking of, unless, do you pronounce your name Mecca?
Mecca, yes.
Mecca, unless you want to, start.
Yeah, I don't talk about sustainability because sustaining prisons is a really horrible idea. So
right,
I'm focusing on justice. Right?
Yeah, it's different systems than that, right?
Right.
We want to sustain.
Right.
I saw a great quote today. Somebody was saying that sustainability is really a floor. We should talk about regenerative and, kind of building something more than just sustaining.
Yeah. It's the kind of thing that words get used and misused and appropriated and, co-opted and greenwashed and, the word green that's happened to the word green. It's, it's kind of you're always having to stay one step ahead of whoever's going to co-opt.
So why don't I just say Gay, Kirby, Sachem, Sam, Kareem, Mecca? Anyone want to be not in that order? Am I missing? Is that an order okay for everybody? I might change it around too.
Fine.
Okay.
I dropped the 4 questions we sent in the most recent email right in the chat.
We're at 8 sharp with 12 in the waiting room. If we could just limit our, if we could be ready to roll, that'd be cool for time's sake. If you guys are ready, just let me know.
I think we're ready.
All right. I'm going to go dark here.
Okay, I'm gonna open the waiting room and then I'm gonna start the Facebook Live. So if anybody's got your Facebook window open, you might wanna close it so it doesn't come up and double up on us and have you spitting 2 audios out, just in case you're following our page and the thing might repopulate and all of a sudden you got 2 of us happening, which would be too many, unfortunately. So, all right, I'm opening the waiting room. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you for joining us this evening. We have a lot to cover tonight, but before we launch in, Sachem Sam George of the Cayuga Nation will be initiating this series with the words before all else.
Nanda digan kote, asoton sios kaiwan ko wado. Ne sungwa di so sungwa we ganohanya. They always scan out to nothing. Did ne and dway he Scott and dway and go and go ha. Scott and Dwata nohanya ne tigani out on go and go ha. Donnie and draw Troy.
Thank you, Sachem.
Who wants to to know how did we know quite? They go to San Diego, Quago, then when Honyo, and it Ganio, Tom Quanigo. Donnie and draw Troy, hot die Hodonio, touch Nagis, now one Hanahe. Lady Day and Dway, Scott here to know you, and it Ganio, Tom Quanigo. Donnie and Dracho is Rugawanas Canadayo, or Hawana, a touch watch art need to sign wine twat, now sango hang or handle, I want you to know it. Lady and Dway head, the Silva Nahanyo, Rugawanas Canadayo, Netiganio to Guanigo. Dane Dra Chowi, Gay Ningodage Hadi Yakiono, Ne Scano Idonotonio, Nedine and Dway, Diutanio Hadi Yakiono, Diokianado, Nedigani Oton, Wanigoha. Dane Dra Chowi, how gay Gauhade, Nagre Sangadiso. De Soto Sato, De Scano Idonotonio. Nedine and Dway, the Sedwanohanio, Gauhade, Nagre Sangadiso.
Thank you, Sachem Sam.
I'm done it all. Yeah, I'm done. I just forgot the last part about closing. But thank you, everybody. What I did was just give everybody we give a thank you for everything that we do, for all the meetings that we come to with different people, and to let everybody know that we give thanks for being here. We give thanks for Mother Earth and everything she does for us. We give thanks to the Creator for doing what He did for us. Also, we give thanks for everything on Earth, the sky, the moon, the sun, the stars, and we give thanks for the people that are here today. And then we can start now. Thank you. Now.
Well, it's really an honor to have you here today. I want to begin by saying we're live streaming this Zoom from Ithaca, New York, which is part of the traditional territory of the Cayuga Nation of the Haudenosaunee and the birthplace of one of the oldest and longest lasting democracies in the world, which our American system is borrowing from, but is really fitting to begin from this place of acknowledgement in these particular times. This forum, the Green New Dream series, this is the flagship forum in a series of forums to follow. And it's meant as a chance to reimagine what a sustainable, just, and resilient New York could look like. I'm so grateful that you could all join us at this time. We're at a turning point in human history. Among other challenges, we find ourselves really at the brink of extinction. Instead of succumbing to the fear and uncertainty of what may happen, I propose that we be fearless and use this opportunity to conceive of a future, a world we want to call home. So we've brought together this panel to have a meeting of the minds about what that world could look like. I should note that participation in this panel does not imply any kind of political endorsement. These forums are about education, starting a conversation, and hopefully getting inspired to realize the limitless possibilities of our potential if we can acknowledge our past, accept our present, and embrace a fair and equitable future for all of creation. So without further ado, I want to introduce our panel. Sachem Sam George is the condoled sachem of the Cayuga Nation, recognized by the traditional governance of the Haudenosaunee. He represents the great law orated by the peacemaker over 1,000 years ago. Sachem George is one of 10 sachems, chiefs of the Cayuga Nation, representing the Bear Clan. He was condoled in April 2005. Having grown up on Seneca Nation territory and having learned Seneca language and customs, Sachem Sam George sought out to learn his Cayuga heritage. The Haudenosaunee people are a matriarchal society. His mother, Cayuga, he knew it was important to learn what it meant to be Cayuga. When he moved back to his home in 2014, as one of the first important tasks, he oversaw the building of the Cayuga Schoolhouse, modeled after a contemporary longhouse. Sachem George has participated, along with the other returning Cayugas, in learning his language and ceremonies. He's taking that knowledge and wisdom to ensure a good future for his people. Sachem George sits on the Haudenosaunee Environmental Task Force, addressing environmental degradation in Haudenosaunee communities by developing culturally appropriate environmental education, restoration, and protection strategies. He's a member of the Haudenosaunee External Relations Committee, which works on political and governmental structures beyond the borders of Haudenosaunee nations. Sachem George is on the Elders Council for Native Community Services for Buffalo and Niagara Falls. In 2019, he was awarded the Bundled Arrow Award for his service to Native American communities. He lives with his wife in Union Springs, Cayuga Territory. He has 2 sons, a daughter, and 3 grandchildren that live in the greater Buffalo area. We also are lucky to have with us today Gay Nicholson from Sustainable Tompkins. There is so much to say about Gay. I will read you the bio about that we have for her, but I will tell you there is a lot more out there. She has been a powerhouse in this community. Since 2004, Gay Nicholson has led Sustainable Tompkins in designing and implementing an integrated program to advance the creation of a more sustainable regional economy. Gay emphasizes a systems approach to working with partners to build the infrastructure and social capacity for more sustainable ways of living and working. Gay participates in countless local partnerships related to energy and climate, equity as an economic driver, and sustainable agriculture. We are also lucky to have Kirby Edmonds from the Dorothy Cotton Institute and, among others, organizations. Kirby is Edmonds is a managing partner of TFC Associates, a human relations training and consulting firm based in Ithaca, New York. He's a managing consultant, facilitator, mediator, and trainer with experience in the areas of managing conflict, team building, supervisory issues, building and valuing diversity in the workplace, and stress in the work environment, as well as network organization and management. He has over 20 years of experience working in the public and private sectors, in higher education, and with public schools. He's been a consultant to public-private partnerships and networks throughout the country, and has worked directly with many working groups tasked with developing diversity initiatives for large organizations. Mr. Edmonds has written many training manuals on conflict management, cultural competency, communication skills, and group facilitation, to name a few. Also with us is Mecca Nagel, who is active in jail decarceration in Tompkins and Cortland and has been for 20 years. She's the author and editor of 2 books on prisons and is publishing 2 more within the next year. One is Contesting Carceral Logic with Michael J. Coyle, and a monograph on rethinking Indigenous justice with Routledge. She is the founder and coordinator of United Voices of Cortland and has taught college courses in prisons in Central New York and Germany. Mecca is currently a professor of philosophy and Africana studies at SUNY Cortland. And last but not least, we have Corinne Beers, who is the coordinator at Get Your Green Back Tompkins. Get Your Green Back Tompkins is a community-initiated and community-supported campaign that works collaboratively to help people and organizations take key steps in the areas of food, transportation, waste, and building energy that simultaneously reduce our community's carbon emissions, save money, and create a socially just local economy. I'm Sujata Gibson. I was born and raised in this area. I'm running for a seat on the New York State Assembly for the 125th District. I'm here to moderate this panel and to learn and to listen. Our forum is going to go until 9 o'clock. Please feel free to send ideas for future forums and questions through the chat. Depending on how far we get, we may not have time to get through all of them today, but we can certainly incorporate them into future panels if we don't get to them today. Without further ado, I'm going to ask the first question. What, as we sit here, Governor Cuomo has asked us to reimagine New York. We're certainly in this moment where everything that we have known up until now is changing rapidly. And we're in this pause. We're all being asked to reimagine what we want to see when we emerge. And I really take that seriously in terms of, I want to hear from people on the ground doing this work, like all of you. And you've had so many varied perspectives and so many different ways that you've entered into this work. So I want to hear all these varied ways of what in your field or in what you're interested, what should community resilience and sustainability look like as we emerge from this? I'll start with you, Gay, please.
Well, I thought it might be good just to talk briefly about the word sustainability and what's meant by it, because it's been, co-opted a lot over the last decade or so. And a lot of people have heard of the it's oftentimes framed as just the triple bottom line, people, planet, profit. But I think it's a lot more than that. And I think it's important to be thinking about, well, what's our framework if we're going to reimagine New York? What all is inside that framework? And, ecological stewardship is clearly a key piece. That's the largest circle, right? Planet that we live on, our life support systems and being good stewards of that. But then the sort of next circle down is community, the people, and working towards their well-being, which is making sure people's critical needs are met, but also that people have room to thrive together. And then the economy part is, well, how do we have a resilient economy? That's the subset, inside our communities and the planet. It is not the larger item, the larger frame. But so how do we design a resilient economy that can withstand shocks while also ensuring that needs are met and that opportunities are open to all? And that there's a fair distribution of any gains that needs to be guaranteed. But I think besides that usual triple bottom line, I think there's some other things that have to be woven in. And one of them, I think, is mutual responsibility. It's not the job of just a few people, a few elected leaders, to figure all this out. It's the job of the many. No one person can be in charge of it. But the good thing is that one of the really strong traits of human beings is our ability to cooperate and our ability to work towards shared goals together and build networks that can achieve those goals, not just individual heroes kind of thing. But a thing that I've always felt needs to be part of sustainability is systems thinking. And there's kind of two elements of that. One of it is the bird's eye view, looking at all of the elements of a system at once, keeping in mind how things are all connected and seeing beyond just the individual. And the other aspect, besides the bird's eye view, is seeing beyond the moment that we're in and looking across time. And I always say that one of the most important characteristics to have is to be always asking, and then what happens? Looking around the corner, seeing what's going to happen next if you make this choice, and seeing what the ramifications of that are, and seeing where the feedback loops might be broken, because that's where that mutual responsibility has to be really vigorous, is because most of our problems are broken feedback loops where the person who, makes the gains leaves and leaves the mess behind and leaves the cancer cluster and the polluted water and the rest of it behind. And that's where we really have to be very strong as people, as a network, to prevent those kinds of broken feedback loops.
Thank you. It's so important to have that overview. I'm actually going to jump a little bit out of the order. We had talked a little bit about an order early on, but what you just said kind of made me think that maybe, it'd be helpful to go from this broader overview to Mecca, you work a lot in a specific area, in prisons and in jails. And when we were first discussing this, you said, you had something to say about the word sustainability itself as well as gated. So I would love to hear what you have to say and go from there.
Okay, thank you, Sujata. Pleasure to be with you all. Well, I'm prepared some remarks here just for in the interest of time, and it may feel a little bit of a slogan or programmatic, so, but I can specify and really answer your question, Sujata. For me, I mean, the part of the question was dealt with justice, right? And justice is important to me when it's not a slogan for just us, which means the wealthy, the privileged, the socially networked, cis, straight, white people. Yeah. When injustice is when prisoners' lives start to matter, when a prison sentence isn't an automatic death sentence, thanks or no thanks to COVID-19, when we overcome the oppressive capitalist system and rethink and restructure the entire prison industrial complex, Right now, almost 100 million Americans, so 1 in 3, have a criminal record, and many, especially racialized folks, are shut out of affordable housing and living wage jobs. What some prison intellectuals have said, prisons, when we re-engineer, when the time comes to re-engineer, prisons could reopen as healing centers once the watchtowers are gone. Justice is when the lives of Indigenous, Black, and Latinx folks matter, when the government sets up supportive, not punitive structures of surveillance. We could begin with some easy reform. Technical parole violation would be prohibited, and nobody goes to jail because of bail, fines, and fees. Right now, there's about 5,000 folks in New York State alone who are lingering in jail because of technical parole violation, which means missing parole meeting, or having a dirty urine sample. Yeah. So these are really low level, if any, kind of offenses. And New York State is one of the worst offenders, being one of the highest contributors to parole violations, to the numbers of parole violations in the country. Yeah. So we're not the progressive empire state that the governor wants us to believe. And when justice means when access to housing, education, healthcare is a right and not a privilege, when everybody has basic income and nobody talks about starving artists or philosophers. When restorative justice is the main focus and not an afterthought of the punishment enforcement. So, in a nutshell.
I really liked what you said just before everybody went on was, that sustainability for you isn't the word you want, because we're not trying to sustain the prison system as it is. We're trying to build something new. So, and look at what justice really is. Mm-hmm. Well, going back to the order, Kirby, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this first question, or what's coming up.
I'd like to speak to justice as well. Several kinds of thoughts. The first one, though, is the restoration of right relationship between humans and among humans, and between humans and every other life form on the planet, and between humans and the planet. And one of the signs that we might have achieved justice is when we have a social contract that ensures that race, class, gender, nationality, and sexual orientation, among other ways we are different, no longer predict well-being, health outcomes, life chances, or wealth. And in order to get there locally, I think we need to cultivate very strong relationships that bridge our differences. But more important than that, we need to cultivate an ethos of mutual caring for everyone. And that's a work in progress.
Amen. Kareem, it is your turn. Actually, Sachem Sam, how about you go? I think Kareem is muted. What do you think? And just to bring it back to the question, like as we emerge from this this pause, this sort of change moment in history, if we were to reimagine a society, what does a sustainable and just society look like? Be interesting to hear not only your ideas for what a Western society would look like, but what an Indigenous society might have to teach us about these concepts as well.
Well, I've been listening to my elders during the daytime, and the message I get from them is that, first of all, we have to have peace among everyone here. And that was the first message that was brought from across the oceans. And that was the first thing that was established. The next thing was respect. And we need to have that among everyone. I've been through the Just Us system. I've been through the justice system. I've been through the Me First Society. And each and every time I've come across these people, different people, they all have the same thing to say. It's about me. Well, there's no I in me. Or we. There's no I in we, you know? What I heard was that hopefully this pandemic was put here to help people to understand how important it is to get along with your neighbor. How important it is to start treating Mother Earth the way she needs to be treated. Otherwise, she will take advantage of the situation herself. She will regenerate, is what I was told. And if we don't do anything about it, we may not be here for that. When do we start? Where do we start? Do we start at home or do we start in our neighborhood? I've been saying to people, what can I do? I say, well, clean up your own yard. Maybe even help your neighbor. And then both of you can help the other neighbor, and so on and so on. When I look at the bird's eye view, I was reminded of how green this place is right now. New York State, how green it is. And then I look at the picture of how not so green Navajo country is. How can we get some of this nice air that we have over there? How can that happen? When are we going to start working together to help Mother Nature deal with everyone here? We need to find, I know that I trade once in a while, and I find that to be, you know, a way of doing things. And it felt pretty good at the time when I did it. I said, oh, this must be the way it happened years ago. And Mother Nature really didn't mind that, because we were taking each other's, whatever it was, and we were putting it back in the earth and giving thanks for that. That's my thoughts on how to get there. I remember that question. It was one of those questions, and I thought about it, and I listened to the elders, and they tell me the same thing over and over again.
Kareem, in the work that you do, do you have thoughts on how we can get there as well? How we can create this?
Sure, I have some thoughts, and I feel honored to be among this group of panelists. One thing I wanted to comment on is just around the shift that we know needs to take place. I mean, there's so much clarity in the science around climate change and the causes of that. And in my work, it's, you know, from what I have learned, where the carbon emissions are coming from and what are we doing about climate change is very clear, and the pie charts are there, and transportation and energy use in buildings and from our food and how we throw things away and it rots in landfills and all of this. And it's very clear what we need to do, and it's very doable. And one thing that is sort of interesting about this, or one point that I'd like to bring up, is the tremendous opportunity that this transition affords us. And when we're switching the way that a society is run and the economy is structured in terms of its energy and the pollution that it's creating, we are giving ourselves an opportunity to say who controls those resources and who benefits from them. So currently our transportation is almost entirely reliant on fossil fuels. And just looking at Tompkins County, it's something around $300 million a year are spent on transportation, of which most of that goes to purchasing cars and the fuel that helps them run. So we can even imagine what it would look like to shift that spending towards locally generated energy for electricity, for electric vehicles, or as we shift it towards more human-powered solutions or more collective solutions like transit. There's just a tremendous amount of money and resources that will free up that otherwise are just leaving our communities and leaving our state for the most part, and can be used for local economic development. So as we think about where we need to go, this is, and maybe this is old news for many folks, but this is part of that Green New Dream, this Green New Deal that can really solve two huge issues that we're dealing with: the injustice and the inequality that we've inherited, and this economic system that is really trashing both people and the planet at the same time. So yeah, so there are other thoughts about how we get there, but I'll stop there for now and let others share.
I want to say, I've done a lot of things, but I actually haven't really facilitated that many panels. So thank you for bearing with me as I'm learning. But I really, what I've been hearing in all of these threads is, and we're starting at a very high level, and we will be drilling down into specifics, but that a common thread is that we're really going to have to bridge some major divides to even start thinking about what a just and sustainable system and society could look like. That we've got to start figuring out first, how do we work together? So many of you brought it up in different ways, and how do we kind of take our power back? So I'm going to ask that, one of the questions that we had posed for just food for thought and getting ready for this panel is, how do we generate consensus and move forward in a world that is right now so splintered and so out of balance? And Gay, if you would start, that would be great.
Okay, I really think that we were talking earlier about the threat analysis that the nation does every year to look at, what should we be worrying about? And it seemed to me, reading that, it was an article in Politico, that a lot of what we're trying to do in terms of things like greater justice, resilient, relocalized economy, a lot of those things that are sort of on the sustainability and justice agenda lend themselves to protecting us from all sorts of disruptions. But when I imagine trying to accomplish some of the practical on the ground infrastructure changes and regulatory changes that we need, first we need much deeper civic engagement. In our culture, we have this passive partisanship that's, online especially, we're pretty passive about it all. And so how do we learn to come together and do that kind of mutual problem solving again, that it feels like, maybe 30, 40 years ago, we were a little better at than we are these days. And one of the tools that people have been trying is participatory budget making. That maybe if we started trying to get that going at local government, county government, state government levels, that people could learn to engage more.
Can you explain a little bit, like what is participatory budget making?
Well, it's an initiative that's been around, I don't know, I guess I've seen it going for 5 or 10 years, where like say a city government agrees that, okay, 10% of our budget can be determined by the residents, not the city council, that we're going to free up 10% of the budget and hold these gatherings of people to figure out what do they want to spend the money on. And I think initially started out doing it more at neighborhood levels, in large mega cities. And it's just a great tool for getting people to like feel like they've got a voice in this, stake in the outcome, and to learn those skills of civic engagement. Another thing, I don't know if you've ever heard of the citizen academies that a woman started up in Syracuse, where she got scholarships. You know, they offered a citizen academy where people could come and learn, how does our local government work? What is a seeker review? How do you participate in one? You know, it was, you know, really empowering to teach people the ropes, that you didn't have to be a political insider to know how to actually pull on a lever of power. So I think we need to build some platforms for the skill development, so that more people will be civically engaged. And then I can imagine us coming together and figuring out how to do microgrids of renewable energy for resilience and local control of, to be able to, again, deal with any kind of disruption that might come our way. Same thing with food supply. I could imagine a citizen effort at solving the HABs problem, the harmful algae blooms, that we need new policies, new regulations, and a really redone incentive structure. We're all learning from this pandemic about local food supply chains. I can imagine that as something that we could, family security is a really dominant value for most Americans, both on the right and on the left. So working together on things that are related to family security, like having energy and having food, might be bridge builders for getting people to work together in the name of being resilient against either cyber warfare that takes down the grid, or some, you know, climate, you know, storm like Superstorm Sandy. You know, there could be a lot of things that we could be working together to be resilient, and then maybe we could repair some of those frayed relationships, you know, between the left and the right.
Yeah, and it's getting so splintered now. It's not even just left and right. It's,
Yeah.
But I think this comment, you know, what your idea is so important, because what I'm hearing you say is engagement, and then focusing, you know, focusing on ways to encourage civic participation as a way, because it has gotten, with all this splintering, it's almost as if people can't even talk to each other anymore, leave aside participate in government, for fear of treading over one of these signifiers of our increasingly splintered groups. So I think that's great. So let's see who's next. Kirby, I'll go back to the regular order we had. I would love to hear your thoughts on this, about how to generate consensus and bridge these gaps.
He's muted.
Stephen, can you see if
A lot of what Gay said resonates with me. My first response to the question was, we probably can't. But were I to try, I would start with trying to find out where our values align. I think what Gay said about family is one place where that might align. But as I said earlier, that ethos of mutual caring is pretty important. Because if I'm dealing with somebody who says, yes, my family is important, but yours isn't, it's going to be hard to figure out how to solve problems together. And so in some ways, it's a starting conversation around where do our values align? What do we really care about? And then how do we define the problems that we need to solve? And what I've noticed is that humans, if they're not too scared to be smart, because humans get scared, we get stupid, but if we can relax, we are really good at solving problems. And so a lot of the challenge of reaching consensus is agreeing on the problem we're trying to solve, naming it well, naming it in a way that actually lets us use the places where our values align, and then working on our problem-solving capacities. But we're not going to be able to do that if we're not willing to be in real dialogue with people with whom we really disagree. And so from a sort of systemic perspective, it's how do we create the opportunities for people who basically are allergic to each other to actually be in real conversation with each other. And that's a tall order. That's why I went to we probably can't, because you can't force people into spaces they don't want to be in. But the more creative we can get about creating those spaces, attracting people to it, I think one of the places I start, the reason this is all very interesting to me at all is I actually am interested in seeing humans survive. Now, not everybody is. So I'm not sure how I solve problems with somebody who's not all that interested in that. But I think a lot of people are. And that when we can put in front of people what does our survival depend on, and how is our interdependence a critical piece of making it possible for any one of us to survive, that is a way to begin some kinds of conversation. I'll stop there.
How do we get people to relax? I mean, I think that's such a key concept. You know, everybody's so scared right now. You're right. There are people who don't have this first common aligned value of wanting us all to survive, or wanting humanity to survive. But how do we create a space so that if there are people out there who want to talk to each other, those that are seemingly very different from each other, how do we create that kind of space so that they can come?
I know in the past I've used study circles a lot to bring people together for small group learning. You know, I think that when it's something heavier and complex and difficult, that, you know, large group, you know, I don't know, lectures or whatever aren't very useful. But in small groups, when some trust is established, then you can start to, you know, go into working on issues together. And when I was director of the Land Trust, you know, working with some conservative landowners and planning board members, that was a way of bridging some gaps and getting to some trust around policy, land use policy. You know, that's just one tool that's out there. It requires, you know, willingness to participate and to go through some of the exercises that help break down some of those barriers of communication.
Great.
I can add something, Sujata.
That would be great, Green. Thank you.
So about the consensus and the direction that we want to go in, a number of things that both Gay and Kirby mentioned resonated with me. And I think this piece of education and relationship building is fundamental. And one of the major sort of pieces of understanding that I think we need to deepen on is this concept of the oneness of humanity. I think it's related to what Kirby was saying about the restoration of right relationships. But this concept that we are really every single human being powerfully interconnected one with another, and our connections to the natural world as well. But just as an organ in a body can't survive without every other organ in the body and every cell doing its part in contributing to the health of the whole body. So likewise are we in our societies and communities. And just that understanding and how that reframes the other and how that reframes who we are working for and how that reframes how we would treat each other is huge. But the other component of that understanding is that just like in a body, every cell needs to play its part. So likewise in a human society that's trying to tackle these immense challenges, it really is going to depend on the capacity and the ability and the support that each one of us are unlocking the potential so everybody can participate. I'm not saying that as like others have to step up, but I'm saying it as in we have to build a society which brings out the capacity and allows for the participation of every single person, because without everybody participating, we won't be able to solve these problems.
Mecca.
Right. Well, I want to come back to Sarah's question and really, you know, what is it we can do in the positive? For one, is to move away from a scarcity model. And I would particularly add a securitization model, right? That your freedom might be limited if you behave badly, you're doing something deviant that society doesn't agree with, and therefore we must lock you away and put you away and put you out of my mind, right? That's clearly a world out of balance. When I traveled on a research project to Mali, to West Africa, right? Every judge, every prisoner warden and gendarme in Mali, where I was in Bamako, said, oh, by the way, let me tell you that prisons are a Western idea. It was a colonial project. There's no African society that ever had something like that. Yeah, it's alien to us. And this is true in indigenous societies the world over, right? So it is, we have created a world out of balance, you know, by deciding that people need to be put in some kind of shock therapy. It starts with our young ones, to put them in time out, right? Put them away so that they learn their lesson, right? This punishment regime really prepares them for the isolation cell, right? To put it very sort of poignantly. So back to Sarah's question, when we move away from scarcity, we're starting to build mutual aid organizations. I know, Sujata, you've been really involved with that in Ithaca. We are starting something beautiful in Cortland as well. Sam mentioned trading and bartering, right? Of starting mentoring programs, right? Why do we have so many elderly who are pushed away into nursing homes? Again, a very un-African idea to set up nursing homes, right? And instead of thinking of the elders as sages who could be mentoring young ones who need a lot of help, right? So that we rethink our kin relationship with each other, yeah? And what I like to ask my students is, am I my neighbor's keeper? Do I even know my neighbor's name or their pet? You know, or their children, right? Or do I only know them when I'm called the police on their pet or their children? And so again, you know, can we start, as Kirby says, can we please have more dialoguing with each other, right? That is so key. In terms of generating consensus around jail issues, hot topics, right? Can we agree to think across the political spectrum that more jail building is bad public policy? Then we have to ask, do bigger jails really curb crime, right? So it comes back to the safety and general sort of moral panic that's shored up. And then ask ourselves and our neighbors and our family members, who among you were, as a kid, wanted to grow up to be a prison guard or a warden, right? We can re-ask questions creatively, for instance, with the polls around the death penalty. Instead of saying, are you pro or con, on the death penalty, give potential jurors options. Would you consider life imprisonment instead of a death penalty if you were on a jury, right? And then we find out the American public, actually, there's a majority of folks who agree that the death penalty would be a really terrible choice, yeah? Not, I'm a penal abolitionist. I don't think life imprisonment is ever a great idea. Or we can take an example from Ruthie Gilmore, a geographer who worked with tobacco farmers, I think it was Georgia, who were basically, they had to rethink their tobacco farm. They were pressured to support a jail or prison building in their area. They were saying, there's job creation there. And creatively, Professor Gilmore worked with them to build a plan for converting farms to yuppie food. What is the ultimate yuppie food? Arugula. So tobacco bye-bye, let's have flourishing arugula farms, right? And they totally bought into that idea, right? And these farmers were not penal abolitionists, right? But you don't have to label yourself or be in the cause of that to work on really concrete ideas for change.
Question that comes up for me that I'd love to hear, Mecca, before we keep going is, and it's kind of echoed through everybody, what everybody's saying is, how do you, there is a tremendous feeling of unsafety, and I guess it's even paralleled in our pandemic. In physical safety, people are beginning to try to live in these bubbles to be away from all germs in hopes that we can keep ourselves safe. But it's sort of happening that way, in our society. People are starting to stay in bubbles because there is a feeling of unsafety in conversation. There is a lot of hate there and a lot of, really wrong things that people lash out at each other with. But then in the prison population, we have, to another degree, the prison question: how as a society do we stay safe, but not, try to eschew and get rid of the elements of society that we say are wrong or bad.
Right. Sometimes this question is put as, what do we do with the dangerous few? Right. Is that where you're heading with your question?
I think so.
Should we just make sure some people are kept safely away from the rest of us, right? Then the question is the prison system prepared to keep them safe in the prison, or have they forfeited all rights to their own humanity, right? And in the case of Jeffrey Dahmer, yeah, he was not afforded that right. Yeah, he was murdered inside prison. We know of prisons as being an incubator of violence, of disease for sure, hepatitis C, AIDS, HIV, so anything that you find in the free society, it is worse, in prisons, in these dense spaces. And prisoners do not have the right to have extra soap or Clorox or even face masks in many cases. And if they're present with COVID symptoms, they might get some Tylenol, right? So it's really shocking how prisoners really are thought of as lesser and do not deserve our compassion, right? And our question is really one of, what do we, if we could rethink, there was a question 10 years from now, 100 years from now, right? What would we do? And again, we learned from indigenous justice practices to say, actually, we need a healing approach. We have to stop thinking of individualized justice, you, Johnny, have done wrong, and you must do some time, right? Or be sentenced to death. But to reflect back on what happened in Johnny's childhood? And by the way, where was the community? And might not be a better approach to see that the community, we as peers, as elders, as educators and kin have completely failed that Johnny in the first place, right? So if we start a sociocentric perspective, right, then we see the criminal justice system that we have right now is completely faulty and needs to be dismantled, right? So
that segues right in. You know, this has gone fast, and there's some overarching themes. We don't hope to answer all the questions of society in each forum, but you know, each one will have a kind of a different focus. But there's a question on the chat, Sam, that I would love to get your thoughts on. It may or may not really tie into the last question on here, but it is, what do the, and I'm sorry, I don't have the pronunciation quite right, but the Janu feel the people occupying their territory need to do in order to keep balance with our community? Like, how can we make sure that a Green New Deal in our community doesn't promote and perpetuate the erasure of Indigenous people? How can we stay accountable? The big wrong was done and we haven't dealt with it as a society.
How to be accountable? What I hear you saying is that we, the community, are doing the best we know of the Great Law and how we're supposed to be running our lives. And with that, we try to get it out to other people so that they can learn also. And it's not really hard, but it's discipline. And discipline is, you know, I've been hearing a lot of these words out here, and nobody's mentioned discipline yet. And that's where the lack of has brought up all of these problems that are happening today because of the lack of discipline. So we discipline ourselves. The community has been doing this for a while, and because of another, what we call a lost community member, has taken advantage of what everyone of the colonization that he's gotten. And he's taken advantage of that to the point of domestic terrorism. So we, as a community, at least I have, been putting out words to the one that made us that he be of good mind also, that he be given the right direction, and that so he don't have to suffer in the end. Those are just some of the things that I do to, because that's what I was taught to do. We don't condemn those that are, you know, yes, it was a surprise in what he did, but then after a while, no, it wasn't a surprise because he doesn't know any better. If he did, he wouldn't do this to his own people. If he had some sense, without the drugs and alcohol or whatever he's doing nowadays, that he would be clear-minded and be of good mind, which he used to be before he got into what we call a mind changer, and you guys call it money. He's got a lot of it, and he's using it to the advantage of what everybody else does, to what he sees everybody else doing. The rich people buying corporations, buying all the little people, and then destroying them at the same time. He's taken some of those lessons from those out there that are trying to destroy anything good happening in the world because it doesn't make them any money. So we have to educate. I heard that word mentioned quite a few times. We have to be disciplined. We have to be understanding. Understanding, I hear Kermit say, understand. You need to understand. In order to understand, you need to go through what it is that you need to understand. I was taught that a while ago. I didn't understand a whole lot of things when I got, started cleaning up my mind. I didn't understand a whole lot of things. I saw a lot of things. I listened to a lot of things. I made my mind up that I wasn't going to be like that. And I started heading that way. But it takes discipline. I tell the young people today that the reason I am as old as I am today is because I was disciplined in a way that you guys aren't, because you're not going to make it 68. You're probably not going to be here. Why? Because you weren't disciplined enough. Do you know how to grow a carrot? Do you know how to grow a tomato? Do you know anything about gardening? Do you know anything about feeding your family without having to go to a major store? Those are some of the things that we teach our community. And we're learning to do that ourselves. There's a lot of people that don't understand that. But there is a lot out there that I've seen around the lake that want to do that, but they're not talking to each other. And I heard that mentioned too. We need to talk to each other. Every single one of us around this lake and everywhere else, we just have to start talking about what can we do? What are you doing? And start doing it. The people that don't understand, we need to show them or educate them what it is. Some people were interested in what we were doing. They came to our garden. They saw this huge garden that was beautiful. Bean plants were like 6, 7 feet high. Strawberries were huge. And the onions and everything else that we grew. They couldn't believe it. I said, this is what's going to help us maintain everything that comes at us. Because that's what was given to us in the beginning. But because of some of those people who saw something different and they could make something out of it to be better than the other people, that's when this whole thing started with, let's get everybody involved. But we'll leave out a few because they don't know any better. So they continued to do this. How are we going to do this together? Get out there and start talking to people. I like the idea of those circles. I've been to quite a few circles. And everyone has an idea there. And then we start talking about it. How can we pursue this further? Well, let's have another circle somewhere else. Let's start doing this all over the place. Invite people in. They don't need to know what it's about. They just need to be invited. A lot of people are not invited to things anymore. And they wonder why they don't have any friends. Or wonder why they don't have a neighborhood. Why they're not part of it. And the reason they have to fight to stay the way they are is because they're not acknowledged. So invite people into your life, into your neighborhood. And those that are healing are going to come out and tell you, this is what happens when you put it into yourself, the discipline and the education. I didn't get where I am today because I didn't stop learning. I learn every single day. I learn something. I learn about those people that are out there trying real hard to get by. But because of their situation, they're not able to, so they revert back to what they were taught. The quickest and easiest way to do things. And finding out that it was wrong in the first place. And they knew that, but it was their only choice. So we need to get to those people. We need to invite them into the circles. Thank you.
So I'm, it's really surprising where this went is not necessarily where I thought it would. I think as a politician of launching into policy, and this is what we need, I think, but the consensus is a lot of us know what we need. A lot of us know what we wish we had, but we can't even begin to get there until we start to bridge some of these differences, start to invite each other in and start to work all together and to really make sure that everybody is involved. So I really thank all of you for coming today. I have a lot of action items on my to-do list, and I think you've inspired all of us to start thinking about how to do that, because we have one chance right now. We're at the turning point. We don't have any time left. If we don't understand that this pandemic is not just a pause, it's a wake-up call, we may not make it. So I really thank you. I hope we're going to have a series of forums about some very specific things, like really looking at labor policy, or, you know, looking at what things we could achieve in the short term in a Green New Deal and other things. And I hope more of you will come back. There's so many issues that you all know about. I'd love to invite you to more panels if you'll come. And I hope more of you who have come to watch, I thank you so much for coming. I hope that we can all take this action item and go out there and start inviting people into our lives and into our circles, and having conversations, because it's going to take all of us. So I'm going to end with a quote, and my sincere thanks, and which is from Arundhati Roy. And as she so eloquently described, the pandemic is a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. We can choose to walk through it, dragging the carcasses of our prejudice and hatred, our avarice, our data banks and dead ideas, our dead rivers and smoky skies behind us, or we can walk through lightly with little luggage, ready to imagine another world and ready to fight for it. So I thank all of you. I hope we can do this. I think we can do this, and I look forward to doing it with all of you. Thank you.